Welcome to episode 93 of the G2 on 5G. It's the latest inside scoop on everything 5G. We cover 6 topics in about 20 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend, and joining me again this week is fellow analyst Anshul Sag. Let's get started with my first topic. So the NTIA and the DoD have launched the 5G Challenge. The question is, can this accelerate a more open 5G ecosystem? So the details are, it's actually a contest. The prize purse is up to $3 million. And the 3 focus areas within 5G network subsystems are distributed unit, DU, centralized unit, CU, and radio unit, RU. And so the NTIA actually advises the president on telecommunication initiatives, and certainly the DoD is involved just from probably all those concerns around Chinese infrastructure and the concern around Chinese government espionage and that sort of thing. But I believe this is a good thing. I don't necessarily believe it's going to accelerate things because Open RAN and vRAN they've got tons of momentum. We've covered this on prior podcasts, but I'd like to get your perspective.
Sure. So I'm not as familiar with this challenge as you are, but I do know that a lot of these challenges tend to produce pretty good results. Usually like 80% or 90% are failures. But there's a small percentage that are successful, and some of those actually do end up launching new companies. Usually these prize pools are so small that they don't really work for, say, an established company, but usually they're for like researchers that are PhD students that are planning on getting out into the real world, or are working on a PhD project, and sometimes this can be their end goal, which is to get that funding. And usually the teams that win these challenges take these wins and run with them in a way that allows them to get funding for a bigger effort. So
yeah,
generally these are just these are not really designed to be full fund efforts. But they are designed to kind of spur potentially new good ideas, usually from the education sector or the academia, to think of a solution for a problem in that. Hopefully that's ultimately the end result.
Yeah, I think it'll definitely spur innovation. To your point, it might spur some startup opportunities as well, but time will tell. But let's move to your first topic this week, and you want to talk about Northrop Grumman and Lockheed and some announcements.
Yeah, so both Lockheed and Northrop have come out with announcements basically within the last week. The Lockheed announcement was on April 4th, and then the Northrop was on April 5th. So, let's just put it this way. The timing was suspiciously close. For 2 very large defense contractors. The first announcement was Lockheed's, which is an agreement that they signed with Intel, which basically helps them to more deepen their relationship with Intel. They signed an MOU late last year, basically aligning their hardware and software solutions for the Department of Defense. So this is obviously for the DoD only. And basically it will allow them to create a more cohesive partnership for their 5G.MIL solutions, which are a multitude of solutions for enabling 5G for the DoD across air, sea, land, and space and cyber domains. And it's kind of like there's already a 5G MIL hybrid base station, which is Intel based. So this is kind of like a cloud edge, network gateway, all kinds of places where Intel might play in infrastructure will be available to Lockheed from Intel. And I think they even mentioned that they've already got some deployments of their 5G hybrid base stations here in San Diego at Camp Pendleton. So it's a very interesting announcement on the Lockheed side. And then on the Northrop side, AT&T announced that they will be powering Northrop's IoT solutions for 5G as well. And this was something that's part of the DoD's Joint All Domain Command and Control, or JADC2, implementation plan, which requires high speed, low latency connectivity across multiple terrains domains to connect warfighters to systems, data, and shooters. So this is a little bit more of a network technology, but I have a feeling that it's probably not that different from what's going on with 5G.MIL.
Yeah.
And I think, having alternatives is a good thing for the U.S. government. Only having one defense contractor bid them is probably not ideal.
Right.
But, overall, it seems like the defense contractors are partnering with the IT industry in a meaningful way that I think will help accelerate the use of 5G in the military and put us at a communications advantage against our competitors, which right now I actually think defense spending is going to continue to grow at a very rapid pace. We do have the largest defense budget in the world, but we're also helping to, prop up countries like Ukraine where they don't have a very strong military budget, or military for that matter, and we're helping fund that. And I think with this war going on and the expectation that there will be continued hostilities, I think defense budgets will continue to grow, and needs for advanced communications will only grow.
I agree with you. And we've talked about the military applications for 5G. I mean, they're varied, and it's great to see these defense contractors working with the Intels and the AT&Ts of the world, really leaning into that tried and true enterprise sort of IT DNA. Because my impression with these defense contractors, they've somewhat been siloed over the years, and 5G is just a different ball game. And so there's an ecosystem there. And this is this was a nice dovetail to my first topic, just kind of talking about, driving a more open 5G ecosystem. So with that, let me move to my second topic this week. And there were a couple of different articles that Light Reading posted, one of the European contributors, and then Mike Dano, who we've had on our podcast before. And both were really focused on, in their articles, asking the question, is fiber basically fundamental to 5G network deployment? So I think in Vodafone's case, they rely a lot on microwave, which is somewhat unreliable. They don't have a lot of access to fiber. So they're going to have to find new and innovative ways to get access to fiber to support backhaul. And then Mike Dano was speaking to the fact that AT&T, in my mind, is a front runner, and I'll share a little bit of inside baseball there in a moment based on some time I spent with them this week. But that is T-Mobile, is Dish at a disadvantage because they're not investing in it? And sort of what T-Mobile and Dish are saying is that it's sort of not important from their perspective to invest heavily in it. And certainly that makes sense when you look at what T-Mobile's doing with FWA. But then when you look at an AT&T that's making major investments in fiber, which is driving significant ARPU in their broadband monetization, but also serving as that fundamental backhaul and backbone to 5G deployment, it's quite compelling. So at the end of the day, I spent time with AT&T this week. We were in New Orleans, and I spent an entire day, and we toured several different sites. I was posting on Twitter, so go ahead at Willtown Tech if you're interested in seeing some of my live tweets there. But one of the most compelling things that we did towards the end of that tour on Monday was that Scott Mayer, who is head of all of network for AT&T, took us into what's called a CO, and we actually got to drop down in the bowels of what's referred to as the cable vault, and got to see all of the cable that dates all the way back to the 1900s. And it's really sort of mind-blowing to see all of that and just sort of understand the scope of that. But certainly AT&T has been, in my mind, in the pole position with respect to fiber. And it's funny, I was talking to Scott, and he made a comment around, 5G is strategic, but fiber is fundamental. So I don't know what your thoughts are, but I tend to agree with Scott's opinion there.
I have opinions.
Yes, you do.
I think there is a place where fiber is fundamental to a 5G network,
Hmm.
but I also think that if you're not fully saturating the use of that fiber and taking the full advantage of that fiber, you're
Yeah,
not actually going to pay for, um, you're not really going to pay for it with just a mobile network.
I agree.
Um,
You have to monetize that with broadband
yeah,
service.
you
Absolutely.
absolutely have to monetize the crap out of it.
Yeah.
Because if you're only using it for one use case, then I don't think it makes sense to actually own it. And I think when you look at like T-Mobile, they're only going to use it for a mobile network. Granted, a considerable amount of traffic, but
Yeah.
if you're an AT&T and T and you're able to use it for both, mobile network traffic as well as broadband and business users, I can actually see that justification existing.
Yeah.
That said, that said, um, I also don't think AT&T's fiber footprint is necessarily where it should be. Um, I think that they're very selective with where they choose to deploy fiber
Hmm.
on the broadband side.
Yeah.
So, I think the fiber deployments that they are doing on the broadband side are probably giving them some savings on their network side. But I think that based on what I've seen in terms of what their fiber deployments are, FTTH or whatever, um, it's not necessarily a big enough footprint where I think they're getting massive cost savings, but I do think that they are getting some cost savings by piggybacking off each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny. I think in the Mike Dano article, T-Mobile referred to it as sort of a commodity fiber. And, I think you and I made the same point that if you're able to monetize that investment, I believe I'm going to just go by memory, but I believe that AT&T's broadband business is a $10 billion plus business, and they're rapidly transitioning their customers over to fiber. I mean, that's a huge market opportunity, right? But you've got to have the bank account to go invest in that, and certainly Verizon and T-Mobile have been more focused on FWA. Although Verizon has had its FiOS business that's been fiber based, but I think that's winding itself out, to my understanding. But yeah, it'll be interesting. But at the end of the day, if you're an AT&T, you can make that investment. You can properly monetize that investment on the broadband side of things. Then I do think it gives you somewhat of an advantage from supporting the mobile 5G network. But to your point, you got to make sure that fiber is in all of the right places. But with that, let's move to your second topic this week. And you want to talk about Deutsche Telekom and their continued journey in deploying standalone 5G in Germany.
Yeah, so they were actually one of the first in the world to roll out 5G SA. The standalone network they have came, I believe, after T-Mobile US's,
Mm-hmm.
and already, they already have it in place, but now um, they have more than 5,000 antennas transmitting at 3.6. And they said that they have 350 new sites that have been added in recent weeks, and that this 5G SA network is now available in more than 200 urban centers and cities across Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that they can provide download speeds of up to 1 gigabit per second and enable minimum response times of less than 10 milliseconds.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is, I think, a very interesting application because Deutsche Telekom uses 3.6 exclusively for 5G, while they
Okay.
use 2.1 with DSS and split that with 4G LTE for obviously for coverage layer. But even 2.1 isn't necessarily a great coverage layer technology.
Right.
So I think when you look at what they're doing, 3.6 is going to be the one they're going to want to use for standalone anyways,
Yeah.
and they'll eventually transition their low band to standalone.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I think this is going to be where they um, really just deploy their use cases. And I think they understand that their customers, which are going to be a lot of enterprise customers, um, because those are going to be the ones who care about standalone the most, they're going to be the ones that want to use it for manufacturing and for fixed wireless and a bunch of different applications, private networking. And I think that they are trying to get ahead of it. And I think they'll probably have some kinds of standalone based applications by the end of the year, because they're on a very aggressive path. And they already have 16 mobile phones and tablets that are already compliant with standalone. So they already have a decent selection of devices that can take advantage of the network. So I think this is going to be one of those things where it will probably be a slower roll, but we'll start to see some early applications pop up this year, and I think the multitude of them will probably be available next year.
Yeah. Hey, is it accurate to state that Deutsche Telekom and, in Europe and T-Mobile in the US, I mean, from my perspective, they're really leading the SA charge, right? I mean, are there any other operators in Europe, to your knowledge, that are as far along in SA as Deutsche Telekom is?
Interestingly enough, Vodafone probably is very close,
Okay.
Which I think is probably what has pushed Deutsche Telekom to be as aggressive as they are.
Okay.
And I think that's a good thing because they will be, competing with each other to provide the best service and coverage. Vodafone claims that their standalone network will be available to all Germans by 2025. So, they obviously have a ramp to happen as well. But I think long term, most carriers around the world that already have 5G deployed and have some kind of standalone plan will probably have it deployed in full by 2025.
Okay. Well, makes sense. Cool. Well, let's go to my third and final topic. And this is interesting. I wasn't aware of this company, Omnispace. I don't know. Have you heard of Omnispace, Anshul?
I have. We actually talked about them once.
We have. Well, I am on allergy medication, thus the voice quality today. But just to reiterate what Omnispace is, they're deploying a hybrid network. And so the idea is that you leverage a terrestrial network, and then in areas that are underserved by connectivity, it defaults over to a low Earth orbit satellite network. And so this week they announced a collaboration with Azure to focus on and leverage the Azure 5G core, much like AT&T announced several months ago as well. So it's funny, like we've done so many podcasts where we're almost at 100 right now. But I guess this struck me as interesting. I'm very passionate about bridging, the digital divide. I am working on a book called The Human Network there, but I think this is pretty innovative from my perspective. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have something unique. I think that from what I recall, the last time we talked about them, they were raising funds.
Okay.
They had raised a decent amount of money. And yeah, I think when you consider where 5G is moving, and that satellite is going to be a part of release 17 and 18, there definitely are some opportunities for some satellite startups to take advantage of the desire and need to provide coverage outside of urban and suburban areas, and fill gaps in rural coverage where it's very hard to dig fiber or even lay any fiber, let alone copper or any kind of wire. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how that plant pans out. I haven't really heard of any big deployments yet, but I'm sure that they're working aggressively to get some trials out there and make it a possibility, especially once release 17 becomes a reality, which might happen next year, might happen in the following year, because this is this is the year of release 16. So I'm hesitant to say next year will be 17, but it's possible.
Cool. Well, let's move to your third and final topic, and you want to talk about T-Mobile and some diversification efforts that are related to its fixed wireless access.
Yeah, so there were a multitude of things that came out over the last week about their FWA business. So they actually quietly started rolling out a second FWA device, which I actually became aware of thanks to fellow analyst Avi Greengart, who got that device while I have the Nokia-based device. And it's interesting because I looked into the Arcadian device, who's the ODM, and it's a little bit more of a cost optimized solution, but it's also a simpler solution in the sense that there's fewer chipsets on the device, which in theory should make it easier to produce and less likely to have a potential supply chain issue. So it's also a MediaTek based device. So it is MediaTek modem, MediaTek Wi-Fi, MediaTek networking. So it's a very integrated device on the MediaTek side, which the Nokia device was Qualcomm based. So they have a multitude of diversity on the FWA side, and in general, I think it's good for them to have supplier diversity, so that they can address any kind of potential supply chain issues that might arise, which it sounds like may have happened with the Nokia device. And it's good because I think having more FWA devices available to consumers and to operators will ultimately benefit everyone, because costs will come down and more people can get access to it. And the overall cost of the plans can stay low, which I think is currently like $50 a month.
Right.
I'm not sure how long that will last, but I think I've already heard some stories of people switching to T-Mobile's fixed wireless network and leaving cable because the speeds and the prices were better.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that they're adding a second vendor into the mix, because they're ahead of their goals with respect to driving FWA subscribership. And so as like you mentioned, for continuity of supply, and certainly given the supply chain general issues that we're seeing most recently, I think it's a wise thing for them to do. So, well, hey, buddy, it was another great podcast. Why don't you take us home?
Absolutely. We hope our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to provide insights on a specific 5G topic for a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at Willtown Tech, and I'm at Anshel Sag. We hope you have a great weekend, and please tune in again next week.